Exactly the same pattern has been used to subvert and then collapse.
Nazization of the nation by the same people who have been voted to prevent the Nazization of the nation and protect the liberty of the people.
You are absolutely correct, but I'm going to say perhaps for viewers you've jumped on one step a little bit too far. I want to bring you back and say that if we look at the nature of the attack on society, it comes straight out of Marxist doctrine. This is absolutely clear, the evidence is overwhelming. And that brings us with a problem, or many people with a question. Well, aren't you talking Nazis, or are you talking communists? What we have to remember is one simple thing, that both the communist doctrine and the Nazi doctrine was founded on the works of Marx. And so if we see in the dictatorship that is establishing itself attributes which are slightly fascist or slightly communist, this makes complete sense because the baseline is Marx.
Well, Adolf Hitler said on February 5th, 1941, he said, basically National Socialism and Marxism are the same. The whole of National Socialism is based on it.
That is correct. So again, we have the raw evidence that the Nazi movement and the communist movement were working very comfortably to a Marxist doctrine. Now, what has happened is that we have been fooled into thinking that at the end of the Second World War, the Nazi doctrine disappeared, which it did not. The fighting was over, but the ideology was very much alive and well, and we know that many of the outright Nazis were allowed to move out of Germany. Many of them went to South America, but many went into the United States.
Is that through Operation Paperclip?
Through Operation Paperclip. And we had the same situation happening in Britain, that we had people who cleansed their identities and then came into Britain. We can also see through documents, through original Nazi documents, like the Europäische Wirtschaft Gemeinschaft document, which was written in Berlin in 1942, that Europe was to be made a single political state with one currency, one transport system, and where the area was to be divided into regions, not countries, and Britain in particular was to be stripped of industry and reduced to a state or a number of states dependent on agriculture and tourism.
Is that not exactly what we're seeing here now?
It's exactly what we're seeing, and the best we could say, if you're pessimistic, you say this is an amazing coincidence that the European Union is implementing exactly the same policies that were set out in that original German document. So here we can see now that the European Union is dividing Britain up into regions, Scotland and Wales as two individual regions. Even our capital city, London, is designated a region under the European Union.
So would it be correct to say that the EU is Hitler's dream come true?
In my opinion, it is absolutely correct to say that, but I want to add one thing to that, is that it is Hitler's Marxist dream come true, because we can see that the European project itself is but one part in creating a global government. This is a Telegraph article on the Bilderbergers, who never tell us what they're doing, and in this document the Bilderbergers are quoted quite rightly as saying they're a shadow world government. And we can see already very clearly that the Bilderberg group, which again was founded immediately post-war under the chairmanship of a known Nazi, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, we have seen that organisation, the Bilderberg organisation, directing not only policy, major policy in countries, but selecting which politicians will be the one that implements that policy. So the undertone of it, even though we're talking Hitler at the moment and Hitler's dream, the undertone is Marxist. And this has an important connection if you move towards what's happening with the Agenda 21 and the environmental programs, because if you look at where the original base statements were made about preserving the world in this generation for future generations, that basic statement came from one sole source, which was the Communist Manifesto.
So we're talking about sustainable development of Agenda 21 being the program through which the property pirates can take over one's homes, their businesses,
yeah,
and change the configuration of all countries for the benefit of the international banksters.
Absolutely correct. This is a corporate government setting it, a one world corporate government setting itself up, and the idea is to take property from individuals. We will not be allowed to own our own property, and that is to be taken away from us, but the regime does it by encouraging us to do the dirty works.
Are they pirates like the pirates of years gone by? They simply come in and steal our property.
You can call them pirates if you like, but they're just criminals, because these people are lying with what they say, and then with their hand they're actually doing the exact opposite. We know that the next stage is the eugenics program, because we are now already seeing dialogue directed towards reducing population. So we've now got people such as Mr. Porritt, originally from Greenpeace, now saying that the British population should be reduced to 30 million. And this is a few years after the population has been deliberately inflated to near 60 million. So these people are now moving on to the next phase. And if you say to me, do I really mean eugenics, that they are going to selectively cull people, I have absolutely no doubt that that is what is going to happen if we allow it.
Is this eugenics program not in fact what Adolf Hitler began in the Third Reich?
Well, he did. He did. And again, history, when we really look into the historical facts, takes a twist, because if we look at where the Germans started to do terrible things to people, it was in the early programs called the T4 programs, where they started to experiment on physically and mentally disabled people. And before that work began, the people who would handle the victims were trained, the handlers were trained. And what was done is that they were desensitized so that they could take victims from wards, from convents, and from asylums, and use those people for experiments without feeling any compassion or guilt. Now, the training techniques that were used came not from Nazi Germany, but from Britain and within the Tavistock Institute. And this is one of the key factors today, that we can see that the Tavistock Institute, for example, is still driving policy forward. And it is a fact that in Britain we are now seeing very clear evidence that eugenics is being taught in schools.
Now, there was an individual named Adolf Hitler. Did he ever come to these islands?
There is a weight of evidence which says that after the First World War, Hitler fought in the First World War as a corporal in the German army. In fact, he was injured several times, and he also went blind after a gas attack.
There is evidence that you have that Adolf Hitler did in fact come to Great Britain in his early years, and it's rumored that he has gone into an organization called the Tavistock. Or am I incorrect?
Right. The evidence exists. I'd say that I believe that the evidence exists of the following events, and that is that shortly after the end of the First World War, Hitler came to Britain, and he came to Britain to visit a half-sister who at that time was living in Liverpool. And